stats that are in the bigger report. So, focus on Frome, I think it says there, annual 2000. So this is looking back at the financial accounting year of April to March this year, April 16 to March 17. We report on that sort of basis to our funders and etc. And that's the report. You'll find that. And over the year, we saw 5,000, just over 5,000 clients across the district, of which 1,293, because I've got the big print version over there, we actually saw in the Frome office on King Street. And they needed our help. Those 5,000 people came to us with over 20,000 problems, of which 5,324 were by those 1,293 people in the Frome office. So, as you can see, problems don't exist in isolation. They come in 1s and 2s, 4s, 5s and 6s. It's quite a complex matter from time to time for ourselves. I want to look at the wards for you this evening in Frome. These are actually Frome residents. So these are not necessarily that if you did the maths, you won't find that adding up to 1,293. Because obviously some of those people who come to the Frome office don't actually live in Frome. They're like from Beckington or from Tridoxhill or from Colford. And we report, you'll see in there's a ward breakdown for the whole of the district. But the wards in Frome, the busiest one, as you can see, is Frome Market. Nearly 350 people from that particular ward. Frome Keyford, Frome Park, Frome Barclay, Frome Oakfield and College. And a slow sort of descending top. But the whole town uses that office on King Street. And as you can see, I'm not going to do the maths, but 349 into 1,721 means that all those people in Frome Market came with a considerable number of issues each. Often debt, often benefits, but they're interrelated, they need solving often in order, but also as a package. Can't just say, well, I'll come back with that next week. We have to do them all as a sort of one-off. The type of benefits, as you can see, benefits, the type of issues that people bring into us, and this is based on the Frome office, not the Mend It wide. So 2,000 problems of that 5,000 were actually related to benefit issues, welfare benefit issues. Now I'll look at those a little bit closer. But the second one, debt, that seems quite low in terms of Frome, but our specialist debt service, under our wonderful case management system, they are reported via our Shepton Mallet office. So when you look in here, you'll see that Shepton, and so they report via that location. So there's a lot of debt clients from Frome that are not necessarily reflected quite on those Frome King Street statistics. But ultimately, our world, on a day-to-day basis, is a world of wealth and benefits and debt. The nice thing, for me, about CAB is that we are that big generalist service. You can come in, you can ask about, I need to know the address of the Russian embassy, or we had a client once who rang up and wanted to know what the answer to 23 down was. This wasn't here, this was in Derby. I said, what, 23? It's a crossword clue. Oh, right. Well, ask them what the clue. Anyway, the clue was, so be it. And I think somebody shouted at the answer from the Amen. And that was the answer. So we can answer people's queries on everything, really. That's a really good thing about the CAB. It isn't just one thing. It is that generalist element. So benefit problems. The three most common benefit problems for us this year: universal credit. Everybody own universal credit? Yeah. It's a wonderful system. For probably something like 85% of the people that use it, it is a wonderful system. It's simpler, it's more accessible, it's straightforward, it's all in one place. For about 15% of people that we generally see, it's an absolute Kafkaesque nightmare, and it's not accessible. It's not joined up. It's not coherent. It isn't accessible. And we've had a massive spike in our benefit problems this year, mainly through complex issues for complex clients, people with cognitive issues, people with sensory issues, people with often with even uncooperative relatives, as if, but it happens, and that causes real problems when it comes to universal credit. Personal independence payments, a big piece of our work, helping people complete forms. A PIT form, I think it's 58 pages long, PIT form. It's daunting. It's daunting for people when there is, oh yeah, you can claim PIT. Right to these, they'll send you a form. They get a form to the post, 58 pages. We've got to start. Well, start with your name, and we'll work on from there. And employment and support allowance. People who are ill, but still actively looking for work. Again, it's a system that is quite demanding, I think, for those that are subject to it. And we get a lot of people who are bewildered by the fact that they're told, well, but my benefit's been stopped because I can get a job apparently, and I don't feel well enough, and it can be quite challenging for them in that sense. Challenging for us certainly. Benefit problem. I just put one. This was a Frome client. Very quickly. To all the staff at Frome C&B. This is a letter to express my deepest gratitude you acted on my behalf when I had a problem with my benefit. My case required so much of your time, resources, energy and endurance that it took over 3 years. I finally received a letter from the job centre on the 9th, informing me that my ESA back payment would be paid into my bank account. I felt overwhelmed. It was actually just over £3,000. It was a huge sum. We get bigger sums than that. But what she says is, I'm disabled and suffer chronic ill health. I've learned to live and cope on the amount of benefit I receive, but when something major or expensive goes wrong in my life, I'm unable to afford to get it repaired. This is the 4th year I've not had any central heating in my home, and the cold makes my pain worse. This back payment will make it possible for me to pay to have my central heating fitted. Your support has been invaluable. Those things are, really tough volunteers. That's the more people write that in, it's heartening as well as somebody who is involved with the organisation. It should be heartening for funders to hear that as well, in that sense. Debt. We helped 250 debt clients at the Frome office this year. Biggest issues: council tax arrears. Average debt, 187 clients, average debt just under 1,000. Rent arrears, 78 clients, average debt of just over 1,000. And water arrears, 68 clients, average debt of £891. These are priority debts. Water's is no longer a priority debt, but a lot of people still do see it as something, but they think they're going to get cut off if they don't pay their water bill. So they see it as a priority. But it technically isn't, because they can't cut off water any longer. So I've got a little feedback from another Frome client. I'm sorry it was me who kept ringing, because I thought I might go to jail. I'll preface this a little bit actually, because this lady had been a debt client some years before, and she'd had advice, her and her husband, and her husband had become ill with we discovered during the interview that her husband had got prostate cancer, and he was refusing treatment because we suspect he felt that the life insurance policy would pay out and pay off this debt. They owed about £17,000 on some personal loans. We got on really well. The reason she went to Glastonbury was our specialist debt worker, Lorraine, there's appointments there on a Friday. This particular lady could only do appointments on a Friday. They drove down there to see her there. But again, she thought she was going to jail. She thought she'd never sort this problem out. We sorted that problem out for her, and her husband is now receiving treatment for his prostate cancer, or taking treatment in that sense. So debt's, again, a big one. If I'd known the health and well-being was on the agenda tonight, I was off yesterday, I didn't read the I would have put another slide in about debt, some before and after questions that we ask clients about before you came to CAB, did your debt cause you anxiety, stress, or depression? And there's a big spike of yes. And then when we closed the case, when we finished 7 weeks later, we asked them again, after you'd had the CAB advice, did your debt problems still cause you anxiety, stress, and depression, etc.? And there's a big spike on the no. It's quite profound. Illustrative, not particularly scientific, but it tells a picture that we're actually moving people from A to B in their lives in terms of health and well-being. So, the last bit, volunteers. We couldn't do what we do without our volunteers. This is the slide from the global one. We've got 63 volunteers across Mendon that are advice-facing, 25 of which are based in Frome. I didn't do the maths on this last bit. Those 63, shall we say, provided, donated, gave freely 14,500 hours of time over the course of the year, which, again, for funders, we say, well, you know, if you want to replace that, $250,000. And that's not paying them too much either. That's a lower sort of wage. But £250,000, that's a big social return on what it is that we do, or they do. And one of the things that they have to cope with, the problems that people come in with, just this final bit, this came into the Bureau right at the beginning of, towards the end of June. And it broke our record, right? Our record was I think, was about 187. Anybody got any ideas what the 187 might relate to? Does it matter if you don't? Not problems. Pages in a letter. The previous record, I think again, was held by a Frome client. And a client had come in with a letter that was 187 pages long. This particular woman, she was a young woman, she was about 8 months pregnant, and she came in. This is not the letter. This letter says here, page 1 of 298. Right? An overpayment of housing benefit and council tax. And it broke down. I mean, I'm not going to beat up the district council too much, because they have to basically show the individual exactly where the overpayment was made. So it was necessary, but quite frankly, for the person it's bewildering, and it wasn't marked that it was a chap called Alex. He came in. I happened to be in the building at the time, and he says, "What do I do with this?" You know, a 298-page letter. It was that thick, as you can imagine. And the client didn't know what to do with it. We did know what to do. It was, you know, the client actually just wanted to pay. I'm giving birth in a month. I just want to pay it. I want all that. I said, well, hang on, we'll sort it out. Let's make sure you owe it first. So that's what these volunteers, the sort of things that they have to cater for on a regular basis. It's quite a challenge. So, finally, there's lots of other things that go off. There's the day-to-day work around advice, as we can sort of conceive it and know it. But we also do personal budgeting support for people, helping them with straighten out their finances. We do energy saving advice, energy switching. We do the form filling, which you mentioned, with PIP and the SA, all sorts of things like that. We do assisted digital support now for people. Universal credit, it's all digital by default. It's surprising how many people still are not good at navigating their way around a computer. We do emergency and crisis support through the local assistance scheme, which is a Somerset County Council scheme, which they're currently, as somebody said, County Council of the building, Somerset County Council are currently reviewing whether or not they're going to continue that scheme into the next year, what we are going to do for people when they rock up with their money. I just do not know. Don't forget that Universal Credit, you don't see any money for 6 weeks. Once you click submit on the online portal, when you click submit, that's it. 6 weeks, you might get some money. 1 in 3 of our clients aren't getting, 1 in 10 of our clients aren't getting any money for over 10 weeks. So we can help with the crisis support. And financial capability stuff, we've got some quite good projects in and around the schools, healthy eating, which is the Children's Voices Changing Choices project has just been accredited by the Money Advice Service nationally as an exemplar. as a project that clearly helps change behaviour within families, and we've got some more funding as a result of that for it. So we're more than just a leaflet, we're more than just advice, there's a lot that goes on. And I'm going to shut up because I only had 5 minutes, I think I was about 10. So I apologise. No. So.
Thank you. No, stay there for a minute, because people will no doubt have questions. But thank you, that was fascinating in all sorts of ways. And what's particularly impressive to me is the fact that you keep all that data, and that you're able to do that, which is brilliant. And I think the ones you mentioned, which you said, it's not particularly statistical, or it's not particularly, carefully scientific. Those are the ones which are often really interesting. So it's really good to know that. Thank you. So, any questions for Stuart before we move on? Tricia.
I don't know if this is working. Yes, it is. I'm just impressed by how, and shocked in a way, how you run using volunteers. It seems to me this sort of service should be funded by the state, but I just wondered to what extent you rely on volunteers rather than paid employees, and how you manage the sort of issues around just operating with volunteers rather than employees.
Okay, well, perhaps I misled slightly. We're a team of those 63 volunteers, and we've got, I think it's 19 paid staff. I think it's about 11 full-time equivalents. Most of our staff are part-time. So it's a mix of paid staff and volunteers. And the thing what volunteers gives us the ability to do is deliver capacity, deliver volume of service. I could sit 11 members of staff down, but there's only 8 hours in a working day, 10 hours in a working day, whatever. I can make them work longer. But you can only get through so much. Whereas what volunteers do is we accrue those and sort of onion skin them around the staff team, we can actually deal with clients in volume. So we can deal with 5,000 odd people's 20-odd thousand clients a year by having that volunteer team. Without those, we simply couldn't deal with the volume. We can deliver a quality service to a lot less. But that's the I agree with them. It should be state funded, but we get our money from local authorities primarily, trust funds, utilities. We try and get money from wherever we can. Town and community councils, for example. The key bit for me about the volunteers, what I always say, is that they root our independence. For me, they do what they do without any stake in the outcome at all. They have no stake in the solution that's broken for that client, and that for me is very important. We had a meeting, a review meeting in July, early 7th of July, with the Lord Lieutenant of Somerset, and she was asking me, well, why do you want me to come? And I said, well, for me, because we wanted to celebrate volunteering. You'll see some case studies in that report if you take the time to read it. I said, I want to celebrate volunteering. For me, it's about independence. And the Crown, I've got a great monarchist myself, a bit more of a Republican, if I'm honest. I said, but the Crown, for me, sort of embodies that independent element within our Constitution. It sort of holds the ring while we will have an election and decide who we'd like to sort of have another few years, and then they give it back. I said, so you basically embody independence within the Constitution, and my volunteers embody independence within my organisation, and it roots us there. We wouldn't be the same without them.
Thanks. Mal.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks very much for the presentation. I guess we're running out of time, so if your answers can be brief. I didn't get a feel for whether or not the number of queries you're dealing with annually is growing. So if you could answer that. And second, you were going to move into this building here with us, and I understand the reasons why you're not, but your office is not the most hospitable or doesn't add much to the local scene either. Have you got any plans to improve that?
First one, are things increasing? I think what we're finding is the numbers, our problem numbers, have been stable over the last 3 or 4 years at about 20,000 plus, clients at about 5,000 plus. Our capacity, the numbers of people we have in volunteers and staff, can basically deliver that amount and deal with that amount. So we have to expand. We had a bit that away there last week. Everyone wanted to do more. We've got to expand the resource we've got. So the numbers are the same. The thing that's changed, if I'm honest, is the channel access that's available now for ordinary people, shall we say that, conventional consumers of advice. Web access is huge. We had 78,000 web hits on the Citizens Advice website from Mendip district last year. 78,000 from this district. And that's a hit they classify as that somebody's staying on the page for more than 30 minutes. So that's a massive consumption. And what that's done is it's removed a lot of people from our waiting rooms. And it's allowed into our waiting rooms those who struggle to access web access or have got cognitive or sensory issues. And we've got a lot of more complex clients. We've got the same complex problems, but we've got complex individuals. And that's the bit that's causing us a workload problem. The bit about the, have we got any plans to sort of do up King Street? We have. We've got offers on to help us with that. We were when we took a decision not to move up here last April or March, April last year, we had the men's shed, I think the Frome men's shed sort of had made an offer to come and actually sort the building out for us on our behalf. We are ready to do that. What happened, what that got short-circuited was that then we had to go through a little bit of a restructure and we had to make some redundancies and we lost the sort of window of opportunity to sort of just plan it in. It came up last week. God, we've got to do something about Frome. You know, people self-stigmatising when they walk in. What have I got myself down to? You know, I mean, you know, where have I got to? So we have got plans for that, and we hope to get those certainly in train before the end of this year. Get something done about it. Yeah.
Good, thanks. Okay,
Right.
well, we do need to move on, but I'm sure people will be able to contact you at other times if they've got other
Anytime,
things.
and
There is a big pile of reports, and
there is.
And do please
Stick
take
them on reception if any
Yeah, yeah,
the
well,
ones that aren't taken. I can leave them there. I do have to apologise myself. I do have to go.
fair enough.
McFadden. I'll come again.
Do.
Let's come in the new year. Let's
Yeah.
do
Good.
a little
No, well, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. All
Great.
right. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So we shall move seamlessly on into more well-being with Nicola. So this is the a presentation, or an update really on the health and well-being work that Nicola's been involved with since her appointment not very long ago.
Thank you. I'm sure I'm going to need this because my voice doesn't transmit quite as well as that. And so the last time I was stood in this room talking was at my interview, so I'm trying not to feel quite as daunted now as I did back then about 4 months ago. So I'm 8 weeks into post now, so this is a kind of whiz through some of what I've been doing, but some of the thoughts as well behind what I've been doing. So I thought I'd start by setting some context around what we mean when we talk about health and well-being. So it's something that can impact an individual or the community, and it's a holistic concept. We're not talking about whether people are ill or whether they're well. We're talking about aspects of their lives that around their social well-being, their emotional well-being, physical and intellectual elements of their lives. And if we can take an approach that looks at health and well-being in this way, we can hopefully achieve what I think should be our vision for Frome and the health and well-being of our population, which is a town where individuals and the communities that individuals live in are physically well and have good mental health, and where people can live longer, healthier and happier lives, and where health and well-being is something that everybody is responsible for and that we can encourage everybody to achieve. So it's very aspirational and will be quite a challenge to get there. So there's quite a few things that impact on our health and well-being, which is where it becomes quite challenging to achieve that aspiration. So our lifestyle is the most obvious one, really. Do we smoke? Do we drink too much? Are we physically active enough? Do we eat healthily? You know, they're fairly obvious things. But other things that impact on our health and well-being include our education, include our employment and our income, include where we live and the kind of housing that we might live in, and also the kind of interactions we have in our community, and whether that's where we live, work or play. So in terms of Frome's health and well-being, there's quite a lot of positives to celebrate. I'm not going to focus on those tonight. But there are things that we could consider addressing, and that's what I've been looking at over the summer. So I've taken data that's in the report from the Frome Town Profile, which was published this time last year. So these are some of the headlines from it. So we have hospital admission rates for stroke and death rates from stroke, which are higher than we might expect to see. And we also have higher than expected hospital admissions for hip fractures than Somerset and England do. Our self-harm admissions in our young people aged 10 to 24 are higher than average. And that image there represents obesity. And although our rates are not poor compared with Somerset and England, in 2015 there was 2,500 people in this area, adults over 16 plus, who were obese. And the impact of that on people's health and well-being and on the services that they might need as a consequence of that shouldn't be underestimated. 1 in 20 of our population live in one of the 20% most deprived areas of England, which is above the county average. And, you know, it's really important that we work to make a difference for those people. And alongside this, 10% of households in Frome are experiencing fuel poverty. So that is where, you know, their ability to pay their fuel bills is challenging for them. Our young people don't do too bad in their GCSE results, but where Key Stage 2 attainment is concerned, it's lower than the Somerset and England averages. And we know that Frome is a town that's growing, and we expect our population to increase by 24% by 2020, and that's going to have an impact on demographics, on some of the data that we've already talked about this evening, but it's also going to have a massive impact on our services. So, you know, the health centre, the hospital, our schools, and also things like sport and leisure facilities, but also the infrastructure, the roads, all the things that support those services. And the other thing to say is that actually there are some gaps in terms of the data that we've got available in that report. I know the data exists elsewhere, but I think we need to look at pulling that together over the summer. So teenage pregnancy rates, childhood obesity, immunisation data, smoking prevalence, and also some of the things that Stuart, you know, some of the stuff that's kind of not so concrete, but is some of the gut instinct stuff and some of the data that organisations like Stuart have got available to them, and the impact that that can bring to the work that we do going forward. So I thought it would be helpful to bring one of those bits of data to life, and I've picked on hip fractures because it's something that I don't know what's happening in Frome about at the moment, and something that I think we could explore. So what's the issue with hip fractures? So we've got 4,400 people aged 65 and over in Frome according to the last census, and we know that our population is ageing. In the 5-year period or 4-year period from 2008, which is the latest data that I've got available to me, there were 190 emergency admissions for people from Frome for hip fractures. And that kind of weird phrase there, standardised admission ratio, and the numbers there, 117 for Frome, it's not a kind of number of people, it's a standardised rate which demonstrates actually quite how different we are to Somerset on that, and why it's something we might want to think about addressing. So what's the impact of a hip fracture? Well, without even the fracture, falls in themselves are a leading cause of mortality or death. The cost of a hip fracture, around £14,000 in the first year. And obviously the cost when someone has been discharged from hospital to social services is considerable, and the impact on family and friends who may be caring for somebody. And then in terms of the individual, these are older people who can lose their confidence quite easily after a fall. It impacts their quality of life. They can feel more vulnerable. They think they might fall again. I sprained my ankle 2.5 weeks ago, and that's in my head that I could easily sprain my ankle again. So if you're somebody who's 70 or 80 who's fallen, the impact of that could be massive. And as a consequence of those things, they become less active, and their social isolation can increase, which then impacts on their mental health. So what could we do? Now, I suspect there's lots already happening on this, so we need to understand what Somerset County Council, who've got responsibility for public health, what they're doing about it in terms of prevention and services that they're putting in place in terms of rehabilitation for people when they leave hospital. and work with health connections and free medical practice and other things that are going on in the town. So we need to know that services are available in Frome, and if they are, do people know that they're available and how can they access them? We need to then consider if more can be done locally to address the issue. There's quite a lot we can do around falls prevention and hip fractures. So falls awareness raising, looking at hazards in people's homes, helping them with medication reviews, looking at strength and balance classes so that there's a preventative element in place for people, and then also in terms of services that are provided to them when they leave hospital to try and stop the falls happening again, and of course looking at pavements and things like that. So a lot of that might already be happening, but we need to know it is and be confident that something is happening to change that in Frome, and if not, what can we do about it? So in terms of what we do next, so over the summer I'm going to kind of finish looking at the data, and I'm starting to think now about how we pull together a strategy for health and wellbeing in Frome, which is one of the tasks that I've been given to deliver quite quickly. And so I'm hoping to pull together an event in the autumn with key people and organisations where I can present some of the things that I find out over the summer in terms of the data and present some ideas for what I think we should be focusing on, but then we need to get an agreement around the table with all our partners because the council can't do this in isolation. After we've had those conversations, we'll put a strategy together and we'll reconvene the wellbeing panel, and we'll rename it the Health and Wellbeing Panel, so that they can work on implementing an action plan that would arise from the strategy. So, you know, we can come up with a few really good ideas, investigate what we can do, and get delivery. And we're not doing anything already on all of this. We're not starting from scratch. It's quite important to say that. So that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay, so immediate questions for Nicola? Go for it.
Nicola, did I mishear you? Did you say the Frome population is due to rise by 24% by 2020?
Yeah.
In 2.5 years?
Does sound like a lot, actually, but that's come from the report. So.
Which report was
that? But that would have been, that's probably from the last census. So I suspect that's from 2011 to 2024,
exactly.
rather than from now to then.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not a further 24%, it's over that.
It's over that period.
I don't think the figures I've seen bear that out entirely in terms of schooling and school places, but I'll look into it.
Yeah, well, we can have a look because some of that will be, I think we don't expect that kind of middle age group to, it's the older population that I think we'll see the increase in. So, but yeah, we can have a look.
Yes,
because that's come from the Somerset
to
Intelligence people, so yeah, we can check that.
Yeah. Anyone else's immediate thoughts? Charles?
The hip fractures. What you can do about it... Oh, sorry. There we go. The hip fractures. What you can do about it really depends on why they happen.
Yeah.
And whether there's something that a town council can do, or whether it's the normal hazards that you have in your home and where your health, like blood pressure drops and you fall over.
Quite interested why the data in Frome is so different to the rest of Somerset. What's particular about Frome that makes that happen, and is it just that the work that Somerset County Council are doing isn't quite translating up as far as Frome? Who knows? Let's find that out. But there is a lot of preventative work that can be done around falls.
Do you have the statistics of why these various fractures are happening? Because I think that is fundamental
knowing why,
to how you actually deal with them.
So whether they're falling at home or whether they're tripping on pavements, whether they're coming down the stairs, that kind of thing. No, but we could look at whether that's available. Yeah.
Tina?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the health connectors. Sorry, we haven't met yet.
Yeah, no, we haven't, but hi.
And also just to talk, I mean, that is quite old data to 2012-13, you know, we're 5 years down the line, and I think there has been a big focus on falls and falls prevention and identifying frailty and those most likely to fall. And in particular, Mel just wanted me to mention about the Health Connectors team, which I think is a fantastic development over the last 2-3 years, where people are being looked at who are likely to fall, and a lot of those things that you talk about are already starting to be in place.
And actually, Kate and I, when we were talking in the office yesterday, wherever your first day back from leave, we talked about the health connectors and what the work they're already doing around that.
And I think linking all that together and the way that's linked with some of the council work as well is really a way of us identifying those in the future who are more likely to fall and take some action around that.
Yeah.
Others? John?
I was interested when you were saying about liaising with Somerset County Council, because I think in terms of a strategy, that's absolutely crucial. There is a health and wellbeing board.
Yeah.
There's a public health element to the county work, which has some funding, and some areas that are looking at in terms of particularly around the impact on health in terms of the environment and climate change. So that's even there in their strategy. So I think in the way forward is actually to try and work with the council, the county, about how you can make difference in Frome. And you may well be right. It may be that in the past Frome hasn't been shouting loud enough. Who am I to say?
I've worked in a county public health team before, so I kind of understand their responsibilities and their roles, but I also understand that they're kind of small teams and how do they reach out so much. So I'm quite interested to make those connections and find out how we can support what they want to do up here.
They are very keen to reach out, I think. And I think they welcome an opportunity to meet.
I'm going to see how far I can get them to travel up here rather
Indeed.
than me travelling down there.
Yeah, absolutely. We know how it feels to go down here.
We could lift share.
Mal?
Thanks, Nicola. I think this is a really crucial area for us as a town council, but more as a town, really, because as the county council slips further over the horizon, nothing to do with our worthy county councillors, but just complete lack of funding. And as the NHS struggles to keep up, even though I'm a great admirer of the local health centre, I think we're going to need some radical, unknown solutions yet. So when the strategy emerges, it shouldn't just be one of those bureaucratic strategies which looks to the past in terms of if only we could get their attention, we're going to get more resources here. That isn't going to work. So somehow or other, the kind of responsibility is shared amongst all of us out there.
And actually, what I didn't touch
and how
on
to tap into that is the key. And I mean, I've got no idea what the answer is, but if we miss that element, then I think we're probably not getting the best out of you or your time.
And what I didn't talk about in that presentation really is how we engage with our local communities and not do to them, and ensure that what we think reflects their reality and that they actually work up projects with us or by themselves, and we just are the kind of in the background supporting them, because those will be the ones that make the most difference.
Sure, I absolutely agree with Mel. Maybe we ought to try and put something together which allows some left field. I mean, thinking and you do need to meet Tina, who's good at that. I mean, have that.
Emailing each other.
But have those conversations. I mean, it's had a long experience of this in Frome. It strikes me that identifying the right gaps for us to engage in is going to be so crucial in this, which I know is what you're doing, and it's all very new in that sense. And then the other thing which we've talked a little bit about is which statistics are actually valid. But it's awfully easy to kind of do that and say, we have something that's worse than Somerset, but how much worse, and does it really matter? And I think, I still think we may need some help with actually saying which of these figures is actually important.
Which is sometimes why talking about the number, for example, of obese adults feels more valid than saying, we do better than Somerset on that.
Sure.
Because actually, is it acceptable that 2,500 adults are obese? Can we do something to support people to change their behaviour?
Exactly, and even if we're above average on something like self-harm, that in itself doesn't matter what. That's good enough in a sense, isn't it? Because we shouldn't be. I accept that, but sometimes it's getting around that, isn't it?
And I think we can help with some of that information.
I'm sure.
We do have more up-to-date information, and certainly hospital admission rates have fallen significantly over the last few years with the sort of focused working of the health connectors, and that scheme is now attracting national interest in because it's one of the only places that's actually reduced
admission rates.
Hospital admission rates, saving about 2 million in terms of the Frome. Not that comes to us, sadly, but the system is working, and we need to develop that really.
Yeah. Al.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because it's such a broad spectrum of things that health and well-being can theoretically are you prioritising sort of where you're focusing?
That's what the strategy work will need to do. The other thing I didn't really reflect is the overlap with the areas of work that Anna and Chris lead in the council as well, and how this won't be seen in isolation. So the three pillars actually overlap quite a lot in terms of resilience and also the environment. And so there'll be some conversations about that. But yeah, I mean, it has to be led a bit by data, but also by the knowledge within the community.
Sure. Does that mean anything from
It's massive.
nightlife and people having stuff to do socially through to public transport?
And it could be that we say, well, actually, we just want to focus on our most deprived community, and that's where our effort needs to be. But we need to have that conversation.
I guess the panels will help with that.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So I'm sure Nicola will be back. I mean, this is very early days. We wanted her to come at this early stage, partly so as people had a sense of where the balance was between health and well-being, and to feel comfortable or otherwise with that, and for us to have that, out in the public. Good. So we move on to another bit of health and well-being, really. A report on the village bus scheme and our exploration of alternatives.
Just before we leave the last item, we actually have a recommendation.
I'm just testing there. Okay. So, thank you very much. We actually need to formally agree that we think that Nicola's on the right track. So I need someone to recommend that we agree the process for developing a health and well-being strategy for the town, which is the way that this is worded to encapsulate everything we said. So can I have someone to propose that? Kath? Someone to second? Ali? All those in favour? Anyone against? Thanks. Yeah, those bits are just the town councillors. Thanks, that was unanimous. Good, thank you. Well done, Peter, for reminding me. So now we can move on to an update, a report, on the village bus scheme. Some of you may remember this has been on our agenda for some time, and what we said as a town council some time ago was that we wanted to look at this in more detail and then bring it back to see where we wanted to go. So, are you going to speak first, or? Or Mike?
I'll say introduction.
There's a double act.
Yeah. Hi. So the good news is, as you might have heard, that the key issue that we were meeting partly to discuss today was we're constantly having cuts to our bus services, and the main one that was under threat was the evening service between Frome and Bath. And the great news is that thanks to Favbug and others that have campaigned about this and worked with First, that they've agreed to continue service until April 2018 without the additional subsidy that they'd asked Frome Town Council for. So that's brilliant, and that's slightly changed what we were going to talk about tonight. But one of the issues we thought we could discuss was the smaller trial that we've been piloting in partnership with Michael Gay and others. We've been working with a couple of local parishes to enable, because they had their weekly bus service cut, we've been trialling a project which works with Mendip Community Transport to provide affordable, a mixture of subsidised and able to pay tickets that then enable people to get from these areas into the centre of Frome. And so Mikey kindly agreed to come and give an update on that, because we've tried that now for almost a year, and the issue tonight is whether we want to continue that for a further 9 months.
I wasn't quite aware that I'd be addressing you all from a lectern or whatever.
You can do it quite informally.
So I'll just spoof my way through as usual. Good evening, and thank you, Chair. The village bus scheme started off last September following an unhappy circumstance and a happy circumstance. The unhappy circumstance was that following the loss of Monstrose market bus some years ago, I was contacted by parishioners from Truddock's Hill and Whittam Friary to tell me that their bus service was disappearing, and they felt very vulnerable in the situation. Was there anything that could be done? The happy circumstance was that recommended community transport, which is a not-for-profit company. I've been discussing with them their situation for a while, and it happened that they had an additional bus become available following a nationwide government scheme. They were supposed to scrap a bus, but actually they refurbished an extra one, so it became available. The idea behind the scheme was to try and make sure that a service could be provided, particularly to coincide with the Wednesday market, as had been traditional, in such a way that no one council bore an unreasonable burden. But at the same time, it did seem iniquitous and foolish, something that our county councillors can know, that we should be administering as a county for sending out bus passes to elderly citizens who had no bus to use them on. It just seemed a bit ludicrous, really. So we started off actually with Batcombe as well to begin with, and 2 journeys. Batcombe narrowly decided not to continue, but the other 3 councils did continue, and we came to agreement, came to a previous Frome Town Council annual meeting and ragged Peter from the floor on the subject, and with various encouragement for people, we established the system that happens to this day. Now, we do have in Somerset a good opportunity. In national circumstances, 5% of the population use public transport. And in Somerset, thanks to the careful administrations, 2% only use public transport, so there is an opportunity there. And who are the people that use public transport? Well, the meeting's had a nice flow about it, because part of the meeting tonight has been the responsibility of the able and those people who are vigorous in life to look after those who are perhaps in less fortunate circumstance. And the people who use our weekly bus service tend to be, and the national statistic told me this before it ever happened, tend to be single ladies over 50 who don't drive or have no access to a car. And as such, in the villages, they're particularly vulnerable. Most of these ladies are pensioners. So the bulk of the revenue ends up coming from Somerset, whether they like it or not, because of the bus pass scheme. For those who may not know the details, the rebate that Somerset County Council gives when someone presents the bus pass is 70% of the full adult fare. And that means that with the legislation we currently have, that the full adult fare, that is the fare that people have to pay if they haven't got a bus pass, has to be very high, so that the bus pass is similarly high. I did point out to the people at Somerset that if I forbade everyone else from going as a full adult payer, and I went on having made the full fare £1,000, then every bus pass shown would be worth £700 a pensioner, and I wouldn't need to be here talking about money. So, if you want a quick money-making scheme, that's the way to go. So we've gone on. We've had largely very steady attendance. The thing about pensioners is sometimes they're ill. Sometimes it's too icy in Frome Marketplace for them to be able to walk across it. Sometimes, as happened, well, I digress, but we had one guy who was terminally ill, and he was a regular passenger, And I'm sorry to say, on one day, one market day, no one got on at Monstro because they were all going to his funeral. He had the ability during the last few weeks of his life to get on the bus. He'd previously driven but had lost his licence owing to ill health, and he could independently come in with his friends and enjoy seeing people on market day on Wednesday. And he said on the bus, he said, I've really enjoyed my day out. And I don't think you can really overprice opportunities like that. Where we are now, we have managed to reduce costs so that up at the supermarkets, virtually everyone comes to the town centre and spends their money in the independent stores and cafes around Frome. So the other councils, that is Wanstro, my own council, I'm parish councillor there, Anwitham and Truddock's Hill are paying the same amount as Frome. We've always divided it equally. My proposition, which is for you to decide, I'm only facilitating this process, is for a further period of funding between now and May. We have bitten off smaller chunks before, but I was reluctant to keep bluntly asking again and again and again, more council business, you're busy people. That doesn't mean to say that I would expect you to say, yes, we're happy to give you the funding till May, and then everyone forgets about it and you just pay out. Every month we get an invoice. I challenge the invoice if I feel that it's in any way wrong. And so every month we have figures that goes to the resilience officer, and we keep a good eye on it. I am not sentimental about this bus service. I am not in favour of empty buses travelling around the countryside. I am in favour of your idea of having a transport strategy for Frome, which I hope will include your links with the villages that surround. I am noting Mr. Ackroyd's letter recently, and I don't think the Bus Services Act will help at all, I'm sorry to say, but I do think that together we can carry on the work of finding a way to get people onto public transport and make sure they have an independent way in and out of Frome. Eventually, I hope that, and I note your electric car scheme, eventually we can hope that autonomous vehicles will come and pick us up and drive us wherever we want just by calling out where we want to go. And come that happy day, and I think you can make that happen sooner in Frome rather than later by encouraging the facilities like the mapping and the charging points. Come that happy day, that's great, and we may have solved this public transport problem, particularly for those vulnerable people. Until that happy day, we need to be creative, resourceful, and I'm asking you to help with that.
Okay.
And I'll take any questions.
Yeah, although, let me think about this. Okay, why not? So, so there's three bits of this agenda. One of which is the continued subsidy, or the continued, for us to continue to support the village bus service. The other one relates to our continued support and work with the 267, and then the transport. But if there's any short questions specifically related to this bit, the village service, let's do that. So Colin, then Gary.
Just very quickly, could you let us know what the actual figure of the subsidy is?
Okay. Yes, certainly. Then, you'll understand that I can't predict the future with any accuracy. The total risk is £100 a month, and but of course, the situation is that Frome and the other councils we're not running this service. Mendip Community Transport are running the service, and we have a memorandum of understanding with them where we will underwrite between us any shortfall that they get through the fare box.
Colin, I think the answer's 567, isn't it?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's all right. I mean, I know you're getting there, but I mean that's what we.
567 is based on the historic usage.
So for the next 9 months.
Yeah.
Gary.
I was just going to ask this bus that you use on Wednesday.
Yeah.
What happened with the rest of it?
I can't. I don't know. I do know that it's used for other things such as schools are hiring it for their service and things like that. But that will be a question addressed to MCT.
It seems to be an obvious solution.
Yeah.
I see them sitting around outside the cheese and grain half the time going nowhere.
I don't know. That's their business, not mine.
Colin.
And so just for comparison, it's right to say that Mendip Community Transport is a not-for-profit organisation.
Yeah.
Tricia.
Just wondering if there was any slack when the bus comes in on a Wednesday. It comes in, is it for 2 hours and then it goes out again?
No, it comes in from Wanstead and delivers people from Wanstead. It then goes back out to Traddock on Whittam, picks them up and comes in. Then it takes people from Wanstead.
Okay, so there's
out.
no
there isn't
slack
a lot of
period.
slack period there.
Okay. Any other specific? Okay. Thanks, Mikey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll come back to the recommendation bit at the end. And pick up the other bits.
Yeah, so when we were talking about whether to continue to subsidise the 267, thanks. I don't mind being up. She wear heels, really. One of the agreement was that we would put in some money, but at the same time we would look into the alternatives. How can we? Things are changing. Public transport, the support for public transport is unfortunately being cut significantly at county level and nationally. And how can we be smarter? As Mikey said, we don't want big buses trundling around the countryside with no one in it either. So how can we boost usage of the services we have, and how can we look at alternatives? So as part of that, I've been looking at a range of things. Things like car share have always been high on the agenda. Sort of 90% of journeys contain just one person, or car journeys contain just one person. So it makes a lot of sense to car share. And there are some apps or websites available now, for example, BlaBlaCar that I sort of looked into recently. And it's so simple and easy to use. There are other things like Somerset Lift Share, but it's a little bit clunky and sort of dry to use. But actually, BlaBlaCars, you can just register. It's a little bit like Facebook. You get ratings as well in terms of passenger ratings. You can just literally just say, right, I'm going from Bath to Frome. If anyone wants to join me, it'll be £2.50 a seat. Join me. And that seems to be how it works. At the moment, it doesn't have a high Frome presence, but if it was something that we thought we wanted to push, we could, we could print out leaflets, deliver it to 12,000 households, really do a big push to Frome. Unfortunately, it is an American company, and, it's not a local Frome initiative, but then sometimes you need scale and, technology to make these things work. And personally, I feel the smart, easy-to-use thing is actually key to this. So that's one possible option that we could look at. There has been talk of having a possible hail and ride scheme called Fruba. I don't know about that. I don't know if we have millions of pounds to invest in that. But, again, it's that similar idea of just sharing the resources that are already there and lift sharing. When we were looking at, I'll do it in order. The next thing is the community car scheme. So earlier this year, we launched the volunteer driver scheme for Frome. It's primarily for people that don't have access to bus services or that can't afford a car or can't drive for medical reasons or have a disability. And since we've launched that earlier this year, we've now have 30 volunteer drivers, 300 members, and we're almost breaking even in terms of covering its costs. We're still awaiting. The way that works is that we get, for people that have bus passes, Somerset County Council pay 50% of their fare, which makes it much more affordable for users. there's a set rate of £5 return within BA11, and we've done a lot working with a medical practice now. We're trialling a scheme where people that need same-day appointments can actually get free transport in, which saves the medical practice having to bring a GP out of the centre. So we're looking at lots of different ways there, and yeah, the great news is that we are gradually making it work financially too, because I think with all these things, you know, we can't rely on subsidies in the longer run. So that's a good project, but obviously that doesn't serve everybody's needs. We've also obviously got the electric car club and the other car club that's still here, and on average, you know, one car club car displaces about 10 privately owned vehicles. It also ties in a lot with health and well-being, because they found that even though you're saving money by using the car club compared to having a privately owned vehicle, people, you know, you just think about it a bit more when you've got to pay £5 an hour. And actually people, they've found in car clubs elsewhere that people actually then walk and cycle more, they have more physical activity rather than just jumping in the car on their driveway. So yes, there's a good link there. And then finally, working with people like Mendip Community Transport, looking not just at the village service, but when we were when we thought the 267 might be removed, we had some conversations with them about whether they could actually possibly replace this 267 evening service. And they gave us some ideas, you know, some quotes. So it was £180 a day that would have been, or an evening, for the 4 services to and from between Bath and Frome. But obviously, it's different to having a professional, you know, a national bus service provider. So, you know, there may be issues around always being able to find drivers. You know, it's not quite as slick and well-resourced as a national bus company. But it's not to say it's out of the question. And there are just different ways that we can start looking at this. But as Nicola was saying earlier, you know, we need to be strategic about this. So I've started to draft a transport policy for Frome Town Council, which I'll share with people, and I'm keen to work with Mikey and also Nat, who's a local transport expert, to look at how we can actually develop a proper transport strategy for Frome. And, you know, we are just a small town council. We can't be expected to be doing, you know, huge things. This is, traditionally, it's been county council that's been highways and, you know, all the public transport services and the national companies. And we are small comparatively, but there are some things we can do and things we can promote and enable to happen and get funding in from elsewhere. So I'm just keen to, yeah, ensure that that happens. And as I say, I'll be working over the next month or so to develop something and to share that with everyone and get everyone's input into that.
Thank you. Stay there for a moment. So are there any specific questions? I mean, what Anna's just run through is the range of things which she and Cara and others have been trying to put in place to look at alternatives to the traditional bus services, which we felt for a long time, you know, won't be able to be continued in the same way. So if there's specific questions around those kinds of things, Bill.
Yeah, just looking at the blah car share thing. I think this is a national thing anyway. Yeah. How does that affect people's insurance? Because a lot of your insurance policies state that you can't not covered for hire or reward.
It's covered.
It's reward.
Yeah, it's covered to 1.5 million liability or something like that. I've looked at some of the details. It's all covered. They've got they do 11 million journeys a year or something. They're Europe wide as well. So they're very well established, and that is covered. It's the same with our volunteer driver scheme. We make sure that everybody gets notification from their insurance company, but that's because they're not making money on it. They don't. There's no issue there.
Yeah, that's right. Because I had to inform my insurance company when I was just a volunteer thing.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind just taking a quick sounding though, in the sense, completely unscientifically. If we were, so this is, you know, it's an American-based, you know, somebody who had this idea and is making billions out of it, a bit like Uber and all the others. So. Do we? I mean, if our aim is to get people to be able to move around Frome more easily and more cheaply and so on, then does that trump other things? Sorry to use that word, but in the sense of, you know, if we were to start advertising blah blah car, is that an issue for anybody, or is it, you know, which of our goals do we want to achieve? Any thoughts?
I don't know enough about it. I would object.
Okay. Sure. Okay. No? No. Okay.
I just don't think we should do their advertising for them. It's a tricky one. I guess a bit of due diligence on how it works, the nature of the company, etc. We would expect before we were
We've tried to use the Somerset one. There is a Somerset one already, but it's incredibly clunky, and you have to sort of sign in, and you know, it's too much of a struggle to do it.
If there were multiple commercial offerings,
absolutely.
You would be hesitant to say, well, we'll
of course.
Good
point. Yeah, sure. Well, we can include that in the strategy, can't we? An outline of the different service providers.
Kath.
The first thing that comes to my mind is the safety of it. It's kind of like hitching a ride. You don't know who you're getting in the car with.
Yeah.
And if we're going to advertise it as a council, does that mean we are guaranteeing people's safety, and what does that mean legally for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if we would actually put, we'd probably just help to distribute the leaflets rather than taking on any sort of liability. But in terms of the way, I mean, I don't know all the details of BlaBlaCar specifically, but it is linked with things like Facebook and things. So you do have networks of kind of people that know people that kind of can be linked in, and people get star ratings. I don't know how it works when you first start out. I'd have to look at that in a bit more detail.
So it'll be one of the things that we can look into in a strategy, if that's the way you take it forward. So are there any other questions that people want to raise or to bring up?
Mine was about the safety issue as well. I mean, I would not want my 18-year-old daughter going in somebody's car unless they've been vetted, i.e. like a licensed taxi company or something like that.
Sure.
Peter.
Thank you. Last time I spoke at Frome Town Council meeting, you were very tolerant in listening to me. I was asking for money. What's the really good news is that thanks to Road and Norton closing the gap, there is now going to be a 267 service through to next March, at least through to next March. I think what's quite interesting looking at the alternatives, and I think it's a pretty exhaustive list of alternatives, is that we have to think about who is using the midweek evening service, and we have to think that most of these people are on very tight incomes. There are typically young service workers who are on often zero contracts, minimum wages, and things, with all due respect, like taxis or even car share, given that these people are coming back late at night, are interesting options perhaps for many people in this room for their own services. They're not actually addressing the needs of the people who are currently on the 267 at 9:10 and 11:10, and those are the people that we really have to think about. What I would be concerned is if Frome were to do anything to undermine the 267 service over the next two periods, because if First were to pull out of this route, that would mean that you wouldn't have a Sunday service at all by bus to Bath. You might well not have a Saturday service, and it's unlikely that there would be any evening service. So there's a lot riding on it, not just those young people from Frome who are relying on those evening services. The really good news is it's not an immediate issue. Clearly Frome has got serious issues thinking about its transport policy, but I would urge you to see that as a broader issue rather than just the Bath and the Frome route, and that every step should be taken to try and protect that over the next 8 months. And hopefully, and Anna in the past has been very active in this, also to support that service over the next 8 months. If Frome people, or if Frome Town Council should do anything to operate against that service, then there is a very real danger that you could undermine it. And looking particularly, there are reservations about BlaBlaCar, but thinking of introducing a car share service on the Bath to Frome evening service, certainly the midweek evening service, could be the death knell for it, and I don't think that's in anybody's interest. Certainly it's not in the interest of those passengers. Just very briefly, one last point. It's great to have the Somerset County Councillors here. Linda Oliver, I've spoken to a lot about this. It is impressive that Baines still are giving £6,500 to support the 267. Across the border you see what Wiltshire does in terms of supporting its buses. it is Somerset, which I'm afraid to say is one of the worst counties, and I'm sure the two county councillors are concerned about that policy too. Sorry for going on.
No, no.
It is such a big issue, and a
Yeah.
lot of people who aren't and are not willing to come to these meetings rely on us to
Yeah.
try and represent their views.
No, thank you. And you know, and Anna did say at the beginning that we're enormously appreciative of and very aware of the work that you've put in to getting this going. The second of the recommendations that we'll come to in a moment is very much, I hope, covers that in the sense that it is about the town council continuing to work with you and others to make sure that the services, you know, is continued. But I think your points about undermining it are really good ones, and we want to take them really carefully into account. Yeah.
Could I just point out, was it a couple of points, was it if you put Frome in place, was it Frome, that's going to put your local taxi service at risk. And was it, if you put Mendip Community Transport, was it on the, was it 267 route, that, was it could also, was it increase, was it fares, was it for the kind of just about managing bus users on the route, because they would have to pay two fares because First Bus would not allow, was it Mendip Community Transport, was it to accept their tickets on their service.
Thank you. I think that's very much why, and that's the third of the recommendations, why we want to have a strategy and to take these points. And so we're not doing one thing without having thought through the impact that it'll have elsewhere. But thank you for those points.
And we do want to promote existing services and increase usage so it can be sustainable. I mean, the 267 is not that far off it, is it, looking at those figures? So, you know, we're very keen to continue that too and not to compete. So.
I'd just like
to, sorry, Mikey, go first.
I'd just like to support the fact that your comment about not just one thing, and Peter's comment that, you know, it depends on the users. In terms of like my clientele, if you like, I invite you to explain to them how they're going to use a car share app on blah blah cars.
And good luck with that.
They'd ask me what I was on. But having a strategy which is nuanced and subtle and addresses the various needs of various demographic, I think is the right way ahead.
Thank you. Martin.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on the question from the County Council point of view. I was made aware of this issue quite soon after being elected, and I know John was as well. We would fully support, obviously, the continuation of the bus service, but I've asked the appropriate questions. My first concern as a councillor was were we being in some way disadvantaged in Frome because our services go out of county? You know, which is very rare in most other parts of the county. And the answer was no, and I pressed further on this. The only answer I've ever got is that all late night services are now stopped. You can't get from Bridgewater to Taunton. And the problem is, I mean, if I can find evidence to disprove that, I'd gratefully receive it. The problem is, to make an exception for Frome would undoubtedly would break a hole in their strategy. It's not a strategy I agree with. Point that out. What I'm saying is I think it's absolutely right to have these contingencies in place, because with the best will in the world, I don't think John or I or Linda are going to be able to go down and thump on doors at county and actually get this decision overturned. I would love to, but I could not promise you that.
Thanks. Al.
My concern, I fully support and completely understand the idea behind not undermining any current services that are operating, because they are very important. And the only tricky thing is unless the national government gets, you know, all diesel buses replaced by battery-powered ones by 2040 or whatever, unless we've got, if we keep receiving cuts and this service does stop, we do need a viable alternative that's already up and working, so we can provide a service for the people who do rely on it. So it's going to be interesting times ahead.
Thank you. Tracy.
Yeah, as the majority of the Frome Town councillors don't actually use public transport, in the area, would they be actually willing, to join with the members of Five on the 267 service for a night out? It will only cost you £5 to travel on all 5 buses.
We can,
sorry, 4 buses.
We can make sure that's passed on. Thanks. Because of course it's only a selection of councillors who are here tonight, but thank you. Mel.
Yes.
If I could suggest, I think the role for the county councillors in this is not to try and overturn the decision on buses, but what it could be, and it's for you to decide, and I'd never want to be a county councillor, is to actually take away this strategy when we develop and actually to play some part in putting it together. And actually saying to the county council and others and other funders that there are around, here is perhaps a radical but nuanced experiment that might work in this semi-rural area and will probably work in other areas too if we can put it together properly. And that might be the way forward, because all sorts all county councils will are subject to this same problem, and none of them have the answers. Actually, building something from the bottom up like this may give them a way forward and actually a way out of some of the problems that they've currently got. So it's for you to use your time as you think fit. But I think you can bang your head on as many doors as you want at the county hall. You will not get that decision changed. But you might be able to get them to think about this as an experiment.
Thank you. Yeah, good. That's one for you to take forward too. Yeah. Good. All right. Yeah, you may. Thanks a lot. Okay, thanks a lot. So there are 3 recommendations before us, which are all slightly different, but unless anyone objects, I'll tell you what they are and then, well, they're there. So one relates particularly to the £567 that we're being asked to put in to keep the village bus service going for another period, during which we'll be continuing to assess that and see whether we want to continue to do that in the future. The second one is about continuing to work with the 267 and look at how we can make sure that those numbers are increased and hopefully therefore play a role in making that financially viable. And then the third one is to ratify what we'd like to do in terms of developing all this as a sustainable transport strategy, which ties all these together. So I'd like to take all those together unless anyone objects particularly. Good, thanks. Someone to propose that? Al, someone second. Tricia, all those in favour? Anyone want to object or abstain? That's unanimous. Thank you. Good. Well done. So we move on from transport to sport. It's very well-being and, no, we don't. No. Performing arts. Sorry, performing arts before sport. I was trying to think of something to say about that, but I can't. So, the performing arts, where's the paper that I need? That one. Good. Yeah. So, okay. Alice going to? Or you're going to? Oh.
Fine.
Peter's going to. Okay.
This is a bit short notice, but I'll pick up the ball.
You're right.
I don't mind talking through it if you want me to.
No, that's fine.
Or I can ask the questions at the end.
Okay.
Sorry, honestly.
Sound like another double act.
As many of you will be aware, some time ago actually, we established a performing arts panel, brought together many of the people, not only within performing arts, but I think across the arts sector generally in the town. And back in December of last year, a report came to council with a number of recommendations with a view to trying to support that sector in the town. There was a view that the town council could play its part in supporting it in a number of ways. And as you'll see from the paper that's been published, there were a number of recommendations that were approved at council in December. And really what we're trying to do here is just provide you with an update in terms of where we've got to in terms of delivering these things. One of the concerns that was expressed by the Performing Arts panel was that there was a need to improve information on the events within the town. The feeling that actually at the moment there are a number of sources of information around events, that it was quite a fragmented picture. Obviously, at that time we had Discover Frome as a potential source of information, and the view that was expressed at the council meeting was that we should do our best to enhance that, and in general to develop the content on Discover Frome in terms of information relating to the arts in the town. So that was the first one, and one of the ways in which we were going to achieve that was by beefing up our resources in the area of marketing and communication. And I'm pleased to say that we now have an intern who has joined us from Bath University. Claire Worrell is with us for a year, and she is currently working very hard on developing the content and the events calendar relating to on Discover Frome. She also has a role to play in terms of supporting the Walkers Are Welcome project to try and improve Frome's welcome to people who wish to walk in the kind of Mendips and generally around Frome, and use Frome as a base. She is being supported by Clementine, who has joined Rachel Griffin. So we now have actually quite a significant resource to support marketing, and in particular work related to supporting the arts sector. The other thing that we have been looking at is how we can improve the notice boards within the town. And currently, we now have access to a further notice board within the Black Swan Arts, following the launch of the Discover Frome information point, and so that enables us to promote the arts in that way. And we're currently investigating the possibility of a further notice board in the Catherine Hill area. And Chris Stringer, our environment manager, is focusing on that. There are some other things which are work in progress, and I might ask Al to say a little bit about those in a moment. There was a feeling that we needed to do a lot more in terms of supporting rehearsal and promoting rehearsal spaces within the town. So that's something which is a work in progress. Another idea that emerged was a local performing arts mentorship scheme for young people. Again, work in progress, and something that we think will be picked up by the Performing Arts Forum, as we're calling it. And we're also going to pursue a launch event for the Walkers Are Welcome project, probably in the early part of next year. So one of the proposals which we're looking to take forward is establishing a more permanent forum for the performing arts. And I wondered if Al could actually step up and say a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Peter. I didn't realise you weren't aware you were going to have to speak tonight, because Rachel said that you've got it covered, and yeah, you did. Anyway, thank you for that. I'll try and wing it through the last couple of things. So, as a lot of people might be aware, we've had a lot of new members of staff come in, so it's taken a while to start activating on these recommendations from last year. But finally, things are happening, and we've got someone design the website, and we've got the notice boards that hopefully there's going to be one incorporated up at the train station that you didn't mention as well, which will be really good. But the last idea about rehearsal bases, if you do want to contact me, there's going to be an email going out to everyone who attended the Performing Arts panels last year, just sort of reinstating what's been said tonight, giving an update on all the different things that are happening. But if people want to register as a rehearsal venue, then they can through me or through the Discover Frome website. And the Walkers Are Welcome launch event, that kind of sort of morphed from the original sort of destination Frome thing, and I think what we'd like to do, or what I'd like to do with the council, is work closer with Frome Festival and help you do what you do so well already, because we've already got a yearly annual Frome Festival that is fantastic. So the mentorship scheme, we're going to be looking for volunteers. That's part of the volunteer for Frome thing, which will be up on the website as well soon. So that's going to be people like myself offering their free time to help young bands, actors, any dance groups or anyone who has any trouble. They can come and speak to us, and we can try and sort them out a place where they can rehearse regularly at as little cost as possible, and also give advice through sort of the last 20 years experience I've had, and anybody else who wants to get into the arts in Frome. Okay, thanks very much.
Right. Okay, so did I catch you right then, Al, this, or a version of this, will go back out to all of the people who we know are sort of on the contact list? Great. Because one of the things which I always bang on about is that whole, the circuit of people that we've, got to think. So good.
It's also worth saying that Claudia is getting we managed to get everyone who runs a venue or a performance space in the town under one roof talking one night last year, and they all agreed that they were going to start communicating better and having meetings independently, and so we acted as a catalyst, which has come a really cool thing. So hopefully things will start looking brighter and people will be talking to each other more.
Great.
When it comes to sort of venues and events and clashes and things like that.
Thank you. Colin.
Just on the topic of rehearsal space, I think it would be good for us to explore ways in which we can offer this space as well, at times when, probably at weekends, at times when it's not being used for other things, as something to facilitate that. Maybe at times with the mentoring where we can sort of run something that people can come to and use the space, or maybe we're offering it at weekends to community music or community performance organisations that might want space to use.
Good.
I think we need to get some more use out of it.
Yeah, more footfall the better.
Get it out as a good rehearsal space.
Absolutely.
And we'll be visiting local schools and doing assemblies next spring as well, just to sort of say, hi, this is what we can offer to young people. If you haven't heard about us, it's another way into sort of getting kids to get inspired.
Thank you. So, any other comments, questions for Peter or Al? Thank you. Okay, that's, this is largely an update, because it's, as I said before, it's really important that for those people who put the time in to recognise that things did happen from the time that they put in and meetings that they came to. So, and we now want to do essentially the same process with sport, following the sports panel, which Kate's going to do. Want to do that one? Yes, stay there if you like. You're right.
Yeah. Don't want to be left out by Nicholas, so I sprained my ankle yesterday by falling off a pavement.
I'm sorry.
Sports and leisure. We had a series of panel meetings back in 2015-16, and we then turned that panel into a forum, and we have updated the Town Council on the various recommendations and the progress over the last couple of years. So this is really to update you on what we have done in the first 6 months of this year, of the 17-18 work programme. And I was a bit nervous, I have to be honest, about putting this report together and bringing it to you at this time, because I was thinking, I really know I haven't done a huge amount around sport in the last 6 months, but actually was really pleasantly surprised when I could see the progress that we have achieved without focusing hugely on it. So I think the next 6 months we should just see ourselves fly through. So you will see in the table in front of you that what we've been up to, and really I just wanted to alert you of a couple of things where we haven't really achieved hugely against our objectives, or those objectives are going to change significantly. So we talked about increasing the sports facilities in the town, and we still have a commitment to doing that. But what we want to do now is to go back to the sports organisations and the various clubs to check in with them that their requirements are still the same. We have worked now to bring the netball club back to Frome, which has been a great success. They now train on a court that they can have league matches on, which has been something that I know many councillors have heard about for many years. So, and we heard today that Oakfield Academy have also been successful with their funding bid for floodlights. So that's all going to be, that's all working well. They're training at Oakfield, they're in good partnership with the school, and there are floodlights going in there. We also know that the Robins are now, they had a great need for football pitches. They're training down at the Frome Golf Club. And I believe, I'm going to look at Gary, that there isn't such a desperate need for football pitches than there was. Great. So, so the needs in terms of facilities have changed. There is obviously, there's still a desire to have an athletics track in the town, a 50-metre swimming pool, and another cricket square. But all of those things require huge amounts of space. Chris and I today were talking about what might be possible at Waylands going forwards, and the conversations that we might be able to have with the county council on their section of land at Waylands too, because that's used by the schools more heavily. But obviously, probably not the 50-metre pool, unfortunately. So we just need to balance these things, and in terms of facilities, we will check back in with the sports organisations. The other thing that hasn't really progressed as much as we would have liked to have done is the increasing participation in adults in sport and leisure activity. Largely that's because there is no longer a SASP sports development worker working in the town, and they have no plans to replace this role, which is a bit of a shame, and won't see. But we'll look at other ways with the sports organisations, and we have seen other things come out of the sports groups relatively recently in terms of things like walking netball and other opportunities for people to try new things. Some unexpected results this year are that 2 of the successful PB events organisations to receive funding were connected to Missing Link and to raising the profile of Missing Link. And we've also supported them with a successful Heart of Wessex project over the last sort of 6 to 8 months, really. So those things are moving forward where we thought maybe we hadn't done a huge amount. So, and actually that's great. So really, and you can see I have suggested what our next steps are likely to be. And actually this will be the last time, in theory, I'll be presenting to you about sport and leisure, which I knew nothing about 3 years ago, and now know quite a lot about, as Nicola and Chris are going to be taking over the area of work. But are there any questions?
Any specific questions? For Kate. Tricia.
Just a question about, in the table, it's under create a network of improved walking and cycling routes in and around the town. It says as above, and I'm not sure if it means the one immediately above or the one above that, which I suspect it means the one next to Walkers Are Welcome.
Yes, it does indeed, because it very much relates to that. So Claire, the new intern that's working with us, who's going to be doing the work around Walkers Are Welcome, will also be looking at how we map the walking and cycling routes and making those more available on our website and in various other formats.
I wanted to ask you about young girls, or girls particularly, which I think I'm right in saying was a recommendation originally.
Yes.
Is that something that we've continued? I mean, is it still in the picture?
Yep, very much so. We supported Purple Elephant to deliver Purple Elephant and Young People Frome to deliver the sports festival, which happened in April this year, with the view to, in the lead up to that and in the aftermath of that, them launching a This Girl Can campaign. Actually then we kind of gave with one hand and we took over the other because we brought Rachel on board here, who is their communications expert. But they now have plans that project, and they'll be launching it later in the year, so in September when the kids are going back to school. And it's going to be very much focused around can't remember what it's called. It's not This Girl Can, but it's Fight Like a Girl. Yeah, so Fight Like a Girl.
Okay, no, so it's still there. Good, thanks. No, because I just remembered it from before when I was reading it earlier. I thought, hold on a minute. Well, yeah.
No, it's still there. Okay, it's still in the offering.
Thanks. Anyone else got particular questions for Kate? Okay, great. Thanks for that.
I like having this slot.
Good. On the last slide.
It's happening quite regularly. It's good.
Yeah. This is the slot when everyone has had enough. No, I'm sure they would have asked you. It was such a good report that there was no need to ask questions. Thank you. Okay. I think that's it. Good. That's it. Date of the next meeting is the 27th of September here at this time. Thank you very much.